Hello, everyone. Welcome to one more webinar in collaboration with Eden and Child Central Asia Project. We will start in a few minutes. We are just waiting for participants to get into the room. So, hello everyone, welcome to today's session. My name is Sandra Kučina and I'm Eden President. I'm very happy to be able to moderate today's webinar, which is one of the webinars in the frame of European project Child of Central Asia, and as a result of the cooperation of European experts in distance learning. I will just open my presentation. So give me a second. So that, okay. Okay, so please hello to the participants, and very happy to have with me the speakers of today's session today. For the speakers, you can introduce yourself in the chat. And later you can post your questions in the question and answer area. We are working on international training program on medical training and education in digital era, perspective and challenges. And this is the second of the webinars in the series of 5 webinars within this program. Just to briefly remind you that Child of Central Asia project is to support the modernization, professionalism, and internationalization of postgraduate training in 8 universities of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan in the fields of pediatric surgery, and child neuropsychiatry. Also, Eden is association with 30 years of experience with aim to share knowledge and improve understanding amongst professionals in distance and e-learning, and to promote policy and practice across the whole of Europe and beyond. And just to inform you that our conference will be now in June. It will be online and registrations are open. And we come to the topic of the second webinar, which is titled Medical Faculties and Digital Education. And today with me are speakers who will talk about this topic and try to answer some very important and present questions. So Jacek Urbaniak, Head of eLearning Center of Jagiellonian University, co-founder of the Association for Academic eLearning in Poland. Professor Przemko Kwinta, who is head of Department of Pediatrics of Jagiellonian University and Vice Dean for Organizational Matters of the Study and Education Program of the Faculty of Medicine. Dr. Johannes Müller, head of Department International Science at the International Office University of Cologne, member of the Education Innovation Working Group of the Coimbra Group, and 2 colleagues from the eLearning Center of Jagiellonian University, Wojciech Pudlo and Andrzej Filip. So at the beginning of, I'm just stop sharing my presentation. At the beginning of the second webinar, I would like to invite Jacek to present the main topics of the webinar as an introduction into this session. So Jacek, please, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. So as I mentioned during our first webinar, just now at some parts of the world, especially in the States, at the Faculty of Medicine of Granada University, there are attempts to modify lecture center education. And actually the same happened at my university, at the Faculty of Medicine. I remember my first meeting with the deans of this faculty, and the main aim of the change in education was to prepare students better for clinical classes, to find different tools, solutions for that. And traditional lectures were not good enough for such purposes. So the Faculty of Medicine started all changes before the pandemic. It was for them easier to adjust to the pandemic situation, I guess. Anyway, students, both students and professors of the Faculty of Medicine were vaccinated very early at the beginning of this year. So I guess just now there are traditional clinical classes as well at my university. So that's our first, presentation by Przemko Kwinta, the Vice Dean of this faculty. And I'm really happy to invite Dr. Johannes Müller, my colleague from the Education Innovation Working Group. And it is important when we switch from traditional learning into online learning to modify curricula, but also the same is necessary when we try to launch international projects, studies for students of different countries. And Cologne University, it is very experienced in such activities. So his presentation also will be fruitful and practical for us. And the nightmare of any online teacher is the complete silence of participants, a black hole, switch off cameras, microphones, no activities at all. So all teachers want to change the situation. And Andrzej Filip and Wojtek Pudło both, lead workshops at my university, how to facilitate interactivity among students during online synchronous classes. They have 2 hours. Just now, Wojtek and Andrzej, please remember, only 15 minutes. And at the last, some, hints, conclusions about e-assessment in online learning. So, Przemko, that's for Sandra to say that. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacek. You are trying to take my role, Okay. Thank you for a very good introduction into the topic. So now I'm giving the word to Przemko Kwinta, professor, who will say a little bit more from traditional into digital education at the Faculty of Medicine from your perspective. So please, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I hope you can see my slides and my presentation. This is always stressful.
You have to share your screen in order to share presentation.
Okay.
So you have here down at the, yes, now we see it.
Yeah, great.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for kind introduction. I'm the Vice Dean of Medical Faculty at the Jagiellonian University, and I'm responsible for the curriculum development. And of course, the curriculum development is a crucial part of medical education. And also, when we think about curriculum development, also we have to think about the methods, how to deliver new skills, new knowledge for the students. So our university is a part of the EU project called Training Future-Proof Doctors for Digital Society. There's 16 universities involved in this project, and also the Students Association, European Medical Students Association, and European Junior Doctor Association. The aim of this project is to discuss new challenges and discuss how to manage the progress of digitalization in our society. So in December 2020, the leaders of these universities, they signed the joint statement about new skills, new necessary digital knowledge for the students. So you can find this document in internet. But for my point of view, as I said, it's very important that when we change the curriculum, also we have to think and we have to change the methods of teaching students. And in our university, we tried to change methods since 5-6 years. And of course, it's not only our idea, but it is well known from the literature that nowadays students, they need a different education. They need a different methods. Here you can see the screen from one of the paper published in 2018, so before pandemic. The data from US, you can find that nationally, nearly 1/4 of second-year medical students reported last year that they almost never attend class during the first 2 preclinical years, a 5% increase from 2015. We also observe in our university that students are boring by the traditional lectures and they need changes. And after discussion with the students, with the faculty members, we decide to switch from the traditional lectures to the new electronic lectures. But I think we have to be very careful, and at the beginning, we have to recognize the different needs and the different challenges for medical education at this moment. Historically, the medical faculty was recognized as a place that the knowledge is the most important thing. So we give a lot of information for our students. And this type of education was characterized by memorization mainly. And factual recall, we teach the students pattern recognition, what are symptoms, what are typical history, what is typical history. Also, we teach the students how to manage the patients, and we give a good receipts, and we don't discuss in many cases why. Nowadays, the students can find a lot of information in internet, in textbooks, in different resources. So I think our challenge now is to teach how to solve the problems, and we have to really put our attention to teach critical thinking. So we have different aims at this moment, so we need different methods. And when we discuss the lectures, of course, the first, I would like to point out differences between traditional lectures and the new electronic lectures. The traditional lectures are delivered live, in person, and by definition with no or minimal online components. And you can suspect limited student lecture interactions. Of course, students can ask questions, but usually they don't influence the output of the lecture or the pace of the lecture. Of course, the teachers, they use slide decks, they use video, they can drawing on the blackboard, on the projector, but this is traditional view. Of course, we can, especially during pandemia, we can deliver such online lectures online, live, but still, in my opinion, we cannot classify these lectures as a online teaching or eLearning, but this is only traditional lecture delivered online. The second is online lecture, which is intended for students to independently watch online. So it's not a live, but it's recorded, and the student can use this lecture anytime. So interactivity is again low to minimal because the lecture is recorded. Students, of course, can control speed of the lecture, can rewind, can go forward, can come back, can listen the lectures a few times. And in my opinion, this type of online lectures are still a little like a traditional lectures, and they are not a new modality for our students. And for me, typical online lecture, electronic lectures, for me, I will call them online module to separate them from the online lectures. This online module is intended for students to independently complete online at their own pace. And such online module involves interactivity in which students should do something during the module. Click, drag and drop, should ask multiple choice questions, should do some matching exercises. So the students should be involved. Of course, my colleagues will give you an overview during the last presentation how to make this interaction possible. But for me, this is really the e-learning, so that students are involved and students are active during the lecture. So by definition, interactivity should be at least moderate, and if you can use some tools, can be even high. All these methods, the lectures, is not a separate part of the curriculum, a separate part of the methodology of learning. And we try to use in our university, as in many universities in the world, something which is called flipped class model. This is very important to point it out, that students learn at home, content at home, so something which they can really learn because it is really memorization. And our goal is to show them how to apply this knowledge during exercises, during clinical classes, and how to use them and how to change them into practical skills. So the online modules, they are part of the wider perspective of the clinical education. Of course, as a leader, as a teacher, you should think about creation of the course and of course, creation of the curriculum. And there are the typical stages, steps, how to create a good course. And here you can find these steps. Of course, number one is learning objectives. So first you have to define what you want to deliver to the students. Next, you should think about the course content. And from my perspective, our problem is what should be removed from the content, because our curriculum is really overpacked, and we have to decide what is really important for the students. Next, you can think about the course plan, how to divide into small lectures, small seminars, small modules. And next, you think about effective delivery methods, as we discussed, maybe online model, maybe simulation, maybe bedside teaching. Next, if you think about e-learning, there is a production phase, very important, setting up online, and the crucial part, checking the acquisition of specific skills, knowledge. So how to test the students, how to be sure that students really acquire the knowledge, the skills. The model content and the learning objectives, I think this is very important thing. And my first sentence is like from the Star Wars: don't underestimate the importance of learning outcomes, because you know what your course will give your students, but very often students doesn't know. And if students don't know how your course is going to help them, they are unlikely to enroll in it. So please clearly define learning outcomes in the beginning. Of course, the content, there are the different methods to create the content of the course, but from my perspective, please involve students. Students' consultations are important. We are experts. We know what should be inside the course. However, students are experts from the different perspective, and you should involve students in the course content creation. Lecture development, of course, there are the two possibilities. One is very simple. So it's a development from live lectures or recordings of live lectures. This is simple, and in our university, there was the first step. We started from the recordings of the live lectures and put these lectures online. However, of course, we know this is not the best method, and during the last 2 years, we changed our perspective, and we try to prepare lectures using some principles. I think these principles are very important. 2 years ago, we started some type of courses for our teachers, for our professors, even that they really should change black and white slides for multimedia presentations, especially if they are recorded and if they will be placed online. Why multimedia design principles are important? Because if you prepare good presentation, you can use not only ears, not only eyes, and not both together, but both simultaneously, which really enchants learning. And there is really confirmed by clinical trials that the students really can retain more knowledge if they are exposed for good presentations. So the preparation of the good presentation is very, very important. So you can find these principles, of course, online. I show you the table with Meyer's principles. I think these principles are highly recognized in the society, but practice is a little different. When we start to teach these principles, our teachers, they are really surprised. They cannot even recognize some simple methods. For example, I show you, this is my slide 10 years ago. I prepared the presentation for treatment of hypovolemic shock. And now I use the slide like this. So if you use pictures, know a lot of text, this is easier to remember. You can give more details and so on. That is some useful information. So now we try to teach the lecturer how to prepare good multimedia presentation as a background to good learning at the beginning. What is our journey? We started 10 years ago to change a little. And the first phase was placing teaching materials for students in the cloud. So generally we put only presentations. Next move was placing recorded lectures in the cloud. Next, 4 years ago, we decided to preparation of the first online courses. And in 2017, we decide that teachers, they can choose from giving lectures online or to giving the lecture stationary. But in 2019, we decide to discontinue classroom lectures and to choose online lectures or uploading recorded lectures on the distance learning platform. We have such platform in our university. So finally, this year, we have online lectures inside 57 obligatory courses among 70 obligatory courses, so nearly in all obligatory courses. So we have 364 online obligatory modules for the students. And also we have more than 150 elective courses based on online teaching. So during nearly 5 years, we changed a lot. And we are quite happy. And the students are really happy with online modules. And we are a university with very, very long tradition of the typical lectures. And at the beginning, we were afraid about the teachers, old professors, that they want to only deliver the classic lectures. But I really was surprised how quickly they change your minds and how quickly they adopt traditional lectures to online models. So I think it's very important to change our curriculum and to prepare our new doctors for a new challenges, digital challenges. So thank you very much for your attention. If you want any questions, of course, I open for questions and for discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kwinta, for very good presentation. I think that your e-learning center is doing just a very good job, because some of the sentences you said sounds like you have come from my e-learning center, especially like learning outcomes. This is my motivation when I speak to teachers about the importance of learning outcomes. We have some questions, but I need to ask you one question. I have as well at home a medical student, and my question to you would be very, very good, clear how we should move to digitalization and digital transformation with the curricula and the methods. But do you make some changes between first-year students and the higher year students? Because, you know, first-year students are just coming to the universities, they are just getting to familiarize themselves with the academic background and teachers, moving them out of the classrooms to online lectures and things like that. Do you think that there should be some distinction in preparation of the first year students and high year students?
We try to use the same method in preclinical and clinical sciences. I think it's possible. And as I said, we try to use this flipped classroom method. It's mean in such cases, we use eLearning as a tool to prepare students for the small groups work. So they should accumulate some knowledge. And next we try to meet in small groups and we try to ask them and give some cases. We try to also introduce cases early during our curriculum. This is, I think, very important, because if you give only lectures, if you give preclinical knowledge, the students are not involved because they are not sure why. Why it's important to, only learn anatomy, physiology, and something like this. So we deliver the lectures with background. It's some definitions, some classifications. They are the online modules. So they should finish the online modules with basic information. And next, during the small classrooms, we try to give some cases and we try to ask them to use this knowledge for the cases. So,
Great.
yeah.
Great.
So I think it's possible.
If my daughter is not going to be satisfied with the University of Zagreb medical schools, I'll transfer her to your university. Okay, so we have a question from Stefano Govoni, who said, he asked how much the live online lecture is influenced by the number of participants compared to traditional lecture.
This is a great question. Before we switch to online, you know, only 20% of students, 30% of students participate in stationary lectures. Now, online lectures are obligatory. It means you have to pass these different, you know, tests. The students have challenges during each online module, and they have to pass all these challenges. So this is obligatory for every student. So this is also, I think, very good for us as for the teachers.
Okay, thank you. Another question is related to this one from Breda Pecovnik-Balon. She asked how many students are online for courses and modules. Are they interactive? This is in relation to the question from YouTube, where the question is how many students do you have in a course, medium, average? Is there a maximum number you feel is a limit?
Of course, it depends on the course, but our faculty, we have 240 medical students, and they are divided into small groups. They are generally divided into 14 small groups. So there's something like 15 students per group. So during online model, it depends on the model. Sometimes it's a small group, 15 students. Sometimes it's two groups, like 30 students, but there's no more than half of the year. So 120 is the maximum.
Good. There are more questions, but I will leave them for further discussion later. So thank you for the moment, for your presentation. Now I will move to Dr. Johannes Müller, who is going to talk about the curricula part, which was already mentioned about transnationalizing curricula by digital means. So Johannes, please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Dr. Kwinta, for this marvelous presentation, which gave me some relief, because my first thought was, when I was invited to contribute to this session, as I'm not from a medical faculty, I'm not from a medical school, if I will really meet the interests and the particular conditions of medical lecturers. And your presentation perfectly showed me that what I would like to present to you is relevant also for medical schools and for medical education. Even though my presentation will only in the last section explicitly address the situation of medical faculties. I would like to start with some theoretical considerations on transnational education and transnational teaching formats before I get more concrete and try to match the wonderful hands-on approach that has been given to us in the first presentation. So the content will be a first part dedicated to the question, what is transnational education and what do I mean with that and why should we care for it? And I'll then shed some light on forms and formats of transnational teaching and learning, and then look at the concrete ways to implement transnational education, how to enable virtual mobility at the institutions, and how that can be transferred into the curricula. And so the real core subject, transnationalizing curricula, is dedicated for the last part. What is transnational education and why should we care for it? Well, transnational is not equal international. And this is especially true in teaching and learning. And with this slide, I'd like to claim that transnational education is a different educational paradigm, and in some sense, even opposed to the concept of international education. But let me stress right away, this is not to make up an opposition which is fake and which is not there. It's just a distinction and an attempt to promote transnational education as an alternative way to look at international education. So if we talk about international education, we usually talk about mobility and about exchange. We talk about international education as something that allows students to experience the difference, to immerse themselves into a different cultural and scientific perspective. And in that sense, international education is voluntarily disruptive, individual and singular as a particular contribution to the personal education of the student experiencing an international different culture. So in that sense, international students are visitors or guests in the country they visit, or with the environment, the academic environment in which they study, hosted by locals. Transnational education, however, is rather about cooperation and interaction. It's on experience of integration, of translation, of reciprocal transition of ideas and views. So in that sense, transnational education is rather integrative, collaborative, and pluralist in views. Transnational students from both sides, from all involved nations, constitute one unique international classroom. So in that sense, I would argue transnational experience prepares for a globalized, multilateral, internationally cooperative, privately and professional world. So that would be a rather general discourse why transnational education or transnational elements, transnationalizing education would be worthwhile. But it's also worthwhile for academic and scientific reasons, as transnationality, of course, enhances the didactical means by a plus of multi-perspectivism, which of course comes with an international classroom, by more diversity, lived diversity and experienced diversity within the learning environment, by being faced with global responsibility according to the composition of the international classroom. Transnationality also enhances the scientific content and the scientific discourse within the class, within the course, as being designed for an international classroom, designed for a multitude of scientific backgrounds. Of course, it has to respect a plurimethodological design. At least it has to face the presence of other methodological approaches in the room. It would be, of course, very indicated for comparative approaches, as the group in itself offers already the basis for comparative cooperation. And it also enhances the deployment of international research and the comparison of international research on a given topic. And that is, of course, the big advantage of mixed teamwork, of mixed teams, that within the teamwork and within the transnational student cooperation, there is more room for the reflection of national scientific traditions and schools and their confrontation with other national scientific traditions and schools. It's, in that sense, an introduction of the students into international research community work, and it prepares for international research experiences and for the practice of communicating with international partners worldwide. That sounds very theoretical, but of course there are forms and formats of transnational education which can be applied basically in all faculties and also in the medical faculty. I'd like to start with the distinction between virtual mobility and virtual exchange. Virtual mobility would be inviting international students to join a digitally taught course. That is about sharing courses with partner institutions, like opening existing online courses, as we just have been presented by Dr. Kwinta. They could be opened to students from partner universities worldwide, with students joining the classes. So virtual exchange students would be admitted in a course, and that approach would not particularly pay attention to the international classroom that is constituted with that, because they are just added on to the existing classroom. It would, of course, also not pay attention to the international perspective as such, and even less, of course, to the intercultural encounter that is enabled by inviting international students to existing predefined courses. But, of course, virtual mobility is a very flexible and interesting tool for international networking, and it's a valuable contribution to internationalization at home, as it opens up the classroom to international students. Virtual exchange is a concept that has been promoted under this name by the European Union, by the Erasmus program. And it's rather about designing a course right away for international students. It's more focused on cooperating with a partner in organizing the course, and it deals with the integration of international students into a course and into an international classroom that is to be facilitated by the lecturer, who should also take into account the international perspective in creating the content of the course. And that should also give room and time for intercultural encounters among the students. So virtual exchange as an approach is more ambitious and a more demanding format, but it is very valuable for sustainable cooperations. And it's also a real extension and an enrichment of course contents and curricula. A particular variant of virtual exchange is collaborative online international learning that has been coined as a notion in the United States. While the virtual exchange format is, as I said, defined by an Erasmus program, and it's rather focused on intercultural experiences and encounters, the COIL format is more a didactic approach focused on content-driven collaboration. And in that sense, of course, it's more appropriate to talk about COIL with view to medical education. The main features are COIL courses are joint or tandem taught courses. They are collaborative in teaching and learning. So teachers and students, of course, have to collaborate. It's interculturally sensible. That's something that comes from the virtual exchange world. It's digitally sophisticated. And what that means, I come to that in a second. And it's customized with view to time and space. It is clearly a concept that rather applies for smaller seminars, up to 20 students from each side. So that comes down to more than 40 people would not be able to be dealt with. But it's very highly interesting and highly appealing to my mind. The main features, let me just briefly go back to the main features. So courses should be taught by one lecturer from each side, who jointly prepare and jointly teach the course. And that makes for an intercultural experience of the lecturers themselves, which also means that they come with positive competition and have to deal with that situation from their side. So it's not only the students that are challenged. Collaborative in teaching and learning, particular attention should be given to cooperative learning strategies. So group work, student projects, mixed teams, joint presentations, etc. is very important. It they are interculturally sensible courses, so the syllabus should reflect the international classroom and take account of it, with view to academic or scientific setup, that is multi-perspectivity, pluri-methodological, comparative, globalized approaches, whatever you name it, and it's the case in your particular field. And with view to the intercultural impact, the syllabus should at least give some spatial care for the onboarding. That means the constitution of the classroom and of the group, maybe with some additional tutoring, with some room for socializing, or with occasions for extracurricular encounters, maybe beyond the official part of the course. Digitally sophisticated, well, constructive deployment of digital opportunities and tools and formats has to be made. And we heard something about that already from Dr. Kwinta. And of course, a tailor-made solution with view to the content and the course composition. And finally, customized with view to time and space. That means an appropriate mix of synchronous and asynchronous elements, like a flipped classroom, like independent projects to be done asynchronously from the students, the inclusion of blogs or shared documents, of a chat forum, things that can be used both synchronously and asynchronously to make sure that communication and collaboration is enhanced. I'm running out of time, as I know, but still 3 minutes. Some practical things. We need to overcome a number of obstacles if you want to introduce such courses. And administratively, we have to reflect, in many cases, time difference and academic term incompatibilities. This is a nasty problem, especially for us Germans, as we notoriously have different academic terms from, for example, the United States. We need to find solutions for that, and sometimes professors even teach courses during the lecture-free periods because that's the time in which the Americans teach. We need to find technical solutions or administrative solutions for the registration of single course virtual exchange students. And at our university in Cologne, we have designed a virtual exchange student status, which is basically the visiting student status, so that those students are rather guests than real exchange students, but they have in that way access to the online resources. And then, of course, recognition of courses and of academic achievement is another important issue, which is very easy in collaborative courses because full curricular integration at the respective home university is granted. And that allows easily to recognize the achievement, the academic achievement of the students. It's slightly more difficult with virtual mobility, but with an international transcript of record, that can be resolved quite quickly. Technical issues mostly depend on student status in at least the cases which I could monitor. But if that is resolved, an access to a joint learning management system and to digital resources if needed could be granted. And in any case, it can also usually be granted individually. Was this a time sign or? Okay.
Well, I didn't say you have to finish because it's very interesting, but if you are at the end,
I will skip the human part, as convincing people is of course a big problem, as you need to convince several instances in order to establish a virtual exchange or a COIL cooperation. And with view to well, the curricula, I said already something about the possibility to insert this. Is obvious that virtual mobility is less prone to curricular integration, as that is a rather fluid medium, whereas established teaching corporations in the sense of collaborative online international learning or virtual exchange usually is something that could also be institutionalized by international agreements and then become even legal part of curricula, especially if it is possible to establish internationalization modules or windows within a given curriculum that would allow the standardized inclusion of such programs into the curriculum, into the study program. I will skip the part on what we did in Cologne because that is probably quite obvious. Even our medical faculty joined many of these initiatives. And last point, especially the involvement into a European University Alliance that is headed even by the University of Cologne, which is UniWell, allowed the medical faculty to develop connections to the Semmelweis University in Budapest, and they are now preparing not only joint courses and lectures, but also joint degree programs and interlocking curricula that would allow to move back and forth between Budapest and Cologne while studying medicine at our university. These are a few conclusions, but I said all this already during the presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting presentation. Just one question. How can we define, is there the clear line between virtual mobility and transnationalizing studies courses? Because today when you have the students at in exchange at your courses, you have to translate part of the course to English or some other language. You have to be aware that students may have some different cultural background and some days of getting things. So there are already some adaptations made in the way of transnationalization. So do you think there's a strict line, or this is overlapping in some ways?
The answer comes with the question, of course. It is, of course, overlapping, but it depends a bit on the personal engagement, the personal commitment of the lecturer. If the lecturer is already adapting to the international classroom, then of course it's there's almost no difference. There is a difference in perspective. If you design your course right away for an international classroom, and if you intend to provide also an instruction that reflects the international perspective of your discipline and the international debates of your discipline, then that of course changes quite a bit. And then of course there are many disciplines. This is less the case in medicine, but there are many disciplines in which international subjects can be constituted from within the research projects. And that of course is quite a change if comparative subjects become more prominent, if subjects that would look at global developments become more prominent. That is clearly typical for transnational education as an approach in education.
Yeah, great, thank you. This is something we have to think on when we design courses. Who are our target group? And this is very important. So thank you. Now we are moving to the e-learning center at the Jagiellonian University through Andrzej and Wojciech. So you're going to talk about interactivity during synchronous and asynchronous activities. Definitely with this pandemic situation, we moved fully online. So what are the challenges? So how do you propose the courses are organized? So I'm giving the floors to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Welcome from Krakow. Unfortunately, the weather is getting worse because an hour ago it was bright and sunny, and now we have slightly overcast day. We are starting our presentation. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So,
hello, I'm Wojciech and this is Andrzej, and in this presentation we will be talking about interactivity in e-learning. As Professor Przemko Kwinta said a bit earlier, we should provide you, firstly, we should provide you a meaning of it. We will be talking about tools, but what are they for? What we should use them and how? This is the first slide is about that. You can see in this slide on the left side, probably the well-known the picture. This is pictures about learning theory, about traditional learning. You can see the student here and some kind of device with information. We probably in the 21st century we understand it like something like the internet with information, and the information are going from the up directly into the head of the student. And student is very passive, but he's happy on this picture. And this is about passive learning, and everything in this picture is wrong, basically. And I think we agree with that. But the interesting thing about this is on this picture there is no teacher, and this picture is from 19th century, and there is no teacher there. There's some kind of device, some kind of information going to the head. The learner is by himself here, and so it's interesting that even in 19th century, probably it was a question: do we need teachers? In fact, if we have books, for example, maybe it's the learner should learn himself, and it's enough. And of course, we know that it's not the case. And on the right-hand side, you have three theories. If you want to dig into the theory of interaction, and what is important, we are talking about tools and interaction between people here, not about interaction between student and the content, or the student and the technology. We are talking here about the interaction between people, between students themselves and between student and the teacher. And those three theories have one thing in common, that they're saying that interaction between people is not like a tool or something you can use. The interaction is basic, it's essential, and it's the beginning and the end of the learning situation. In short, the social constructivist, the first theory, is very classical, from the beginning of the 20th century, and it said, like Professor Przemko Kwinta said, that the meaning is at the beginning of learning, that the language is your basic tool. When you teach the students, you should consider the language, the categorization they have, if they have a professional language or not, and it's the very powerful tool for you. And of course, the dialogue is needed and essential here. The Lev Vygotsky said also about the concept of zone of proximal development. So the teacher, in short, the teacher should know his student, what information he already have in this particular moment in time, and what tasks are appropriate for him in this moment. So the dialogue between teacher and the students is everything in this theory. The social learning theory by Albert Bandura is about learning by observing. For example, when medical student is going to some learning situation, he also observe the teacher. He not also listen what he is saying, but he observe in what kind of behavior the teacher have, what kind of how the teacher solve the problems, and he will behave like the teacher in short time. So when you are a teacher and you know about this, it's very powerful tool for you to build a learning situation, to show the student how to behave in particular situation. It's his second theory. And the third theory is modern one, and it says how to build a community of learners. it doesn't mean always this community of students, but also the community, for example, of medical people who are who have the same problems to solve in some social area, local area. So they have problems, and how to build successful community in which they can learn from themselves. And this is very technical question. So it's not about every community, it's about particular successful community of learners. So, and having said that, we will be talking about the tools, but please remember about those theories and don't use these tools as a transmission device to transmit information. Okay.
Okay. And now we are going to present you the so-called logistics. And by logistics, we mean all the technical and organizational aspects of selecting and using interactive tools. First aspect is the tool should be synchronous to support interactivity during real-time communication, for example, like our Zoom meeting today, doing live online classes, or doing live stationary classes if there is a need. Or maybe should the tool support learning at own pace when students interact with the material in asynchronous model? Or maybe the tool should work in both contexts and be more flexible. Also important is the ease of implementation. Is the tool easy to use by the teachers and also by the students? Does it require some training or some IT skills? Or maybe even it requires assistance from the IT staff with more complicated tools. We can imagine that sort of situation. Also, how much time is involved in preparing in the activities and also in learning how to use it. For example, we have simple tools like Answer Garden and Whiteboard. We are going to use both these tools during our webinar just in a moment. They are very simple and don't require much training and explanation. And on the other hand, they are e-learning platform, for example, like Moodle. They require administration by IT staff. They also require some basic training for the teachers, but also they give a lot of possibilities and tools for those who would like to spend some time to learn how to do it and to prepare the activities for the students. Also, there's other important questions in the area of logistics. Should the tool base on user accounts, or it should be open? You see, open tools are very easy to use, don't require much preparation, but they have limited functions. For example, if we need access control, then account-based services and tools are better because we can assign particular students to the particular task and maybe even in the particular time. Maybe we want to store the data from the activity, not only see the result, but to store it for later. Maybe you also would like to link the data from the activity, the results, with the particular students, for example, for the purpose of evaluation. So in that case, we would need a tool or online service with user accounts. But also there might be some privacy issues. For example, there's infamous European law called General Data Protection Regulation, which restricts many things that we can do with external tools. Also, some people might not be willing to give their data to the external companies. Some people even are afraid of using Google. It's probably too much, but we have to take all these things into consideration. And in that context, e-learning platforms, not only Moodle, but all of them, basically can integrate with so-called student management system. That's university-wide system that collects all the administrative data about the students and the classes they attend to. So the learning platform can just work on this data, and in that case, all the problems I've mentioned are basically non-existent. Also, last but not least, there's another issue. Should this tool be mobile friendly? You see, there are more and more students who don't use desktop. For example, these are data from our model, and as you can see, roughly 40% of students uses either iOS or Android, which means mobile device. So we don't have exact data about how many of them are using mobiles only, but from our help desk, we know that there's more and more students who use mobiles only, so the tools should be at least on the basic level mobile friendly. And now we would like to present you an interactive toolbox. We will show you and tell you about some examples of different types of software, and we also will propose some very rough classification with the different types of the software for different things. But first, we'd like to ask you a question. What tools do you use to facilitate interactivity? I will post a link on the chat, and please click the link. There's a tool called Answer Garden. It's a very simple tool, and there's a question. You can post the names of these tools that you are using. Just please submit one name at a time. So please, for example, input Teams or Zoom, press submit. No, please don't use commas, just use it as it is. Okay, I will post the results. Yes, we have Zoom, we have Mural, Saibo. That's something new that I haven't heard before. MS Teams, yes, thank you very much. You can see there are many possible types of software, and we will show you some examples of these tools. And the first, let's call it group or very rough category, are virtual whiteboards. These are shared multi-user virtual whiteboards that allowed many people to cooperate. First of them is so-called whiteboard. It doesn't require an account, and we are going to use the whiteboard as a finishing activity during our presentation. But sometimes you might need something more robust. For example, there's a Google Jamboard, which is sophisticated tool for virtual whiteboards. First of all, it has access control, so we know which student contributes what. We can use the images. Whiteboard is too simple for the backgrounds, etc. And also options like this are available in the popular real-time synchronous communication tools like Zoom, WebEx, Teams, BlueButton, and others. This is very popular option.
Okay. For those who need a cooperation, like creation of a document or by multiple users, preparing some group presentation or recording results of experience, there are tools like Google Docs or Office, and you probably know them, and they required some registration, or in the Google Docs you should register to do it, but the students don't need to register. But they came with quite sophisticated access management, so you have control, and they also offer some virtual disks or other files and multimedia. But you probably know them already in some sense. For those who need something more simple, some quick, there is a tool like Etherpad, which can be used without user accounts at all. But it's very simple. But if you need to prepare some quick document, text document in a group, it's very quick, very simple, and you can use it at any time. And okay.
So maybe you would sometimes need to ask students some simple question, and you don't want to spend a lot of time doing that. So first of all, you can use tools like AnswerGuide, and you've already seen it preparing the questions. It's just inputting the question and posting the link to your students. Very, very simple. But if you need something more sophisticated, there's, for example, Traceider. It's a tool where you can propose some ideas, and the students can discuss them by inputting pros and cons of this idea, posting comments, and also voting on the ideas they present. And there is also WooClub. It's an interesting tool because it's for asking questions, but in real time for synchronous activities. So you can use it during online classes or during stationary classes. It's a tool when you ask questions and students answer them in real time using the mobile application. And sometimes you might need to ask more complex questions. For example, not only multiple choice, but also some hotspots showing something on the picture, some types of matching, short answers, etc. So you might need, or maybe you'd need to ask more than one questions, multiple questions, some questions multimedia. So you have popular tools like Quizlet, Mentimeter, or Kahoot, all very useful tools for quiz making.
There are also many tools for different things like Padlet or multi-user presentations, for multi-user presentations, or Miro for mind mapping. They are great. You could check it out if you want, but we will recommend that. They are partly free, but you can do some, for example, some presentation, or free presentation for free, and you can use it for free at the beginning without any problems. So we recommend to check it. And so Padlet is about presentation, group done in the group by the internet, and Miro is about mind mapping in general. And there is also some tools which are quite useful, like simple tools like stopwatch. It's very easy to use, and it could be very useful during the synchronous learning and teach.
And finally, there are Moodle tools. Moodle is sometimes underestimated, but please remember that Moodle was created by its initial, at least authors, with the social constructivists in mind. So it was designed to be able to host many different tools for student interaction. They start from the simple but powerful forum, because the forum on the Moodle is optimized for teaching. For example, there's a mode where student doesn't see the answers of the other students before they post their own answer, in order to not be inspired or distracted by other answers. There are quizzes, and quizzes on Moodle can be very interactive, for example, with the feedback and multimedia. With the feedback, the teacher can input very robust answers, and use this as simple tool for computer-mediated teacher-student communications. There are also tools. This is a plugin, student quiz plugin, which allows students to create their own question, evaluate them, test them, and rate them, and the question later can be used during the classes. And also there are other tools like Workshop for so-called peer review, where students can grade the colleagues' essays and Also, the teacher can check how the students are evaluating others. There's a glossary which can be created by the group. There are also a tool like wiki for hypertext articles and a database for recording some, let's say, experiments. So Moodle is a very powerful tool. It has to be set up by the IT department probably. You have to sometimes train teachers, at least if in those modes, more advanced tools, but it offers a very large toolbox of basic tools, which then later can be supplemented by all those external tools that we have mentioned before. And for at the end, you would like to ask what's your opinion on interactivity? We'll again post a link on the chat. There's a whiteboard with advantages on the left and disadvantages on the right. If you would write down something on this whiteboard.
Good. We are trying to engage our participants. I hope they will participate and give some answers. I think that in all of this, it's very important to have the support of experienced and expert team who will support teachers in using all these tools. So the e-learning center, such as one at the Jagiellonian University, is very important part of this process. Do you agree?
Andrzej, we don't hear you. Your microphone is off.
Thank you.
Hear me?
Yes, probably automatically it was muted. So we agree with that. We've conducted a lot of training sessions, not only during COVID, but we've been doing this for years. And now there are, of course, some extra training for those who didn't start it earlier. And also we have a help desk which is available every day where people can call and we will answer the direct question and help them. And even during the start of the COVID pandemics, our help desk was running even in the weekends, even on Sundays for several weeks when the whole thing started.
Yes, I can imagine it was a great pressure on supporting services to support teachers and students. We are running out of time, so I would like to thank the colleagues from the e-learning center. And Jacek, back to you shortly about e-assessment in online education.
Okay. Wait a minute. Yes. Okay. So the beginning will be simply the summary of what my colleague said before. Yes. And Professor Kwinta suggested to use more graphics than text. So actually this will be like that. Yes. And you know, we cannot mimicking you know, traditional classes, traditional lectures when we switch into, you know, digital education. That's obvious. It was repeated several times before my presentation by my colleagues. Yes, but we must remember that no mimicking at all. It is easy to say generally, but then it is difficult to translate into, to implement in real life, But still, we must remember no mimicking. Very often, it is a typical mistake of the colleagues, professors. They like to behave like during traditional classes. Yes. And just now we see the view from the old book about the process of learning in the Middle Ages. And it is generally regarded as learning by heart. Yes. And we say, well, this is in the Middle Ages. Yes. Not just now. Actually, it's not the case. Very often what we do during education, we simply transmit some knowledge into students' mind, and then during the online examinations or simply examinations, we want to get back this knowledge. And this is very similar to memorization. Yes, what was mentioned, as far as I know, by Przemko Kwinta and also perhaps by Johannes. Yes, and so if we decide to prepare online examinations, we must change curricula, syllabuses, etc. We shouldn't have the same course and then change this course automatically into online examinations. Yeah? And it was mentioned about comprehension, analysis, etc. And all tools my colleagues mentioned using e-learning platforms, etc. All these tools, you know, are important, useful to ask sophisticated questions, not only typical, you know, easy questions. Yes, so that's the case. Yeah? And when we talk about online examinations, there are plenty of recommendations and suggestions, but I try to prepare several practical hints. Actually, we did this several times, many times, great number of test online examinations, students, etc. The first, my hint, or even some recommendation would be the following. Don't use, for example, MS forms, but to conduct an online test examination, you should use e-learning platform, Moodle, Canvas, Blackboard, and the like, but e-learning Moodle platform. It helps to control more the students' activities. And actually, there was an independent survey by sociologists on the online education and my university ordered by directors. And one of the recommendations of this survey is the following. Use e-learning platforms for online test examinations, not other tools like MS Forms, which is a part of Office 365. Also, there are some other, you know, different, I'm sorry, so other hints. For example, we should, you know, have not too much time for the test. It is very difficult to estimate the real time needed for an online test, but still it is important not to have too much time. That's a mistake if there is too much time, and it opens room for cheating. And also, you know, it is important to have a possibility to choose questions randomly from different pools. Yes, it is done automatically at once. Yeah, So two students have different set of questions during test examinations. And one more hint, you cannot go back to the previous questions. I wonder whether you guess which of those hints is the most controversial for students. The last one. Actually, they protest. We want to go back, to former previous questions. But actually, it prevents us from, some kind of cheating. For example, a student doesn't know an answer, asks somebody, and then a colleague, friend, sent by SMS an answer, etc., and then there is the answer. Yeah. And there are different types of online examinations. First, it is, proctoring. Yeah, proctoring. This is something which is done by an external subject. So, video and audio is sent by the university, by the examiner, to the external company, and it is checked by the team from this company online, or later recorded version is checked. But it is expensive, and our university didn't decide to adopt such a solution. And the vast majority of European universities also didn't have online examinations in such a form. Yeah. As far as I know, Cologne University started some kind of proctoring during the last examination session. So perhaps there will be time to say something about that, Johannes. Yes, and so we decided about a bit homemade version of proctoring, light version of proctoring. So. Actually, during online examinations, test online examinations, the teacher has two actually possibilities. He or she can observe students via Big Blue Button, MS Teams, Zoom, and other such tools. And on the other hand, there is, e-learning platform with tests. Students should answer in this strict calculated time. And I was surprised, as I mentioned during first webinar, that the results were very similar. Actually, at the first examination session, I mean last summer, so the result of online test examinations monitored in such a way and not monitored at all. But during the last winter session, the differences are really much greater. Yeah, and actually we can see this. I showed this last time, but still, it is essentially important at the bottom of the slide. And you see the number of students. So during summer session, it was more than 3,600 students in monitored online examinations, and more than 13,000 students non-monitored examinations, and it is much more during the last summer winter session. So my recommendation would be to use monitored online test examination, with these restrictions I mentioned and called them hints, because I think it works to some extent. And actually, you can say, okay, we see the results, and this is not a Gaussian curve. Yes, it isn't. But actually, the authors of this independent survey on online education at my university checked this with grades results before the pandemic. And also, the curve was similar. So actually, you know, also there was no Gaussian curves as far as results are concerned, grades are concerned, before the pandemic at my university. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Jacek. Very, very important things. Definitely, teachers need support from services in order to know all these things besides the subject they teach. We are coming to the end of our session. Maybe one or two questions we still have. Regarding, let me see, for Jacek, no proctoring, but internal and free solution in example SEB, Safe Exam Browser plus Zoom. What do you think about that?
Actually, I asked my colleague Andrzej, who is an expert on that. And actually, there are some counter arguments for that. Andrzej, could you repeat this question?
Yes, of course. The SEB, it's a useful tool, and we used it for years during stationary lectures in the halls equipped with a computer. It was working okay, but we have serious doubts about all the technical issues connected with SEB because it has a limited number of usages. I'm not even sure if they had proper iOS version. First of all, there was some problem. Now they have, for example, they don't have version for Android and mobile devices, only for stationary computers. So a lot of students couldn't access it, and this would cause a problem. Also, other students might have technical problems because Safe Exam Browser and others like Lockdown Browser or Respondus integrates quite deeply in the operating system and might lead to a computer failure even. So we decided not to use it online because there can be much more problem than.
So to sum up, it is good for online examination, but in a room, yes, in a computer room, but not using private laptops. Actually, you know, this is our attitudes, approach at my university.
Yeah. Thank you. I would say that the good solution would be open text exams in future, and more trust between teachers and students. But well, we are, I would say, far away from that. One more question from before. We had a question. I think that would be for Dr. Kwinta. Farid asked how you conduct practical work online. I imagine you don't, but you provide environment in order to.
Yeah, we during whole pandemic, we don't stop bedside teaching for even one day. We have all bedside teaching in hospitals. We have bedside teaching in small groups, 2 students per doctor. So they are like a member of the team, so it is not a problem. So we perform bedside teaching on the bedside. Generally, I think the online teaching for practical skills is extremely difficult, and I don't recommend to switch for online for the practical skills for the bedside teaching.
Yeah. I agree with you. Although we do have virtual labs, virtual worlds, but we have to prepare students and teachers for such way of teaching and learning. And maybe the final questions to sum up our session today. The online education is definitely part of the education today. The pandemic some kind of forced us to move much more online than we planned before. But to any of the panelists, do you think that now we started to build communities of practice, and that sharing knowledge and expertise is something which is very important? There are more and more students wishing to do some virtual mobility, wishing to study at the different universities, and it's not always necessary to be physically present all the time. So what benefits do you see from this situation that we have experienced? Are we going to move back to the traditional way of teaching and learning, or are we going to take the best from the online and move on?
Perhaps Professor Gian Battista Parigi, if he is present, it would be interesting to hear his opinion, because he still defends traditional lecture in a good sense, of course, in the process of education. So
I think that he is among the attendees, and I'm not sure that he can get the mic in that way. I cannot enable him but maybe Johannes, you can start with the answer here.
I'm pleased to do, yes, of course. Yeah, it would be the best if the two words could be combined, and if we could benefit from the experiences made under the Corona pandemic and transfer that into a new normal in which digital and physical teaching and face-to-face teaching can coexist. But, and there's a big but, in many ways, at least the universities which I am in touch with did not in time react on the situation that will change once we return to face-to-face teaching. We won't continue with Zoom, and we won't continue with Teams or things like that. We need to find ways to combine the two worlds, and that means a hybrid type of teaching that has to be established, and that needs different technical requirements and different didactical solutions. And here we really have to start once more. Of course, the practice that we got with digital tools will help a lot, but it's not that we can simply continue with what we did in the digital semesters that we just passed. We have to transfer that into a new normal in which hybrid teaching can establish forms of coexistence between digital and face-to-face.
I would add something about the danger of pandemic for the education, in the sense that there is much more focus, on synchronic activities, and not asynchronic activities, and this is dangerous. Actually, asynchronic activities are more, useful tool for students to cooperate, to be active, to go deeper into the subject, etc. But the tendency, at least in Poland, at our universities, is different. But I guess the same is at your university, Johannes.
I could get you because, yeah.
Yeah, I think, as I pointed out, this is very important to distinguish between online modules and lectures. Because if you deliver the lecture, you can deliver stationally, you can deliver online synchronously, and it doesn't matter. For me, it's exactly the same. There's very low students' interactivity in most of cases, and also it's mainly to give the knowledge. If you give a lecture for the big group, because lectures are for the big groups by definition. And I think we have to really move from the big groups into small groups. Medicine cannot be taught in the big groups. This is, I think, is a fundamental change in our understanding of the medical education. If you want to give the lecture to 100 people, it is really nothing. They can listen and they can forget immediately. And there's no interaction. So in my opinion, some facts, some definitions, criteria, and so on, which need memorization only, we can deliver online. But we really need more time for interaction with students. We really need more time in small groups activities. We have to need more time to teach clinical thinking. We need more time to teach reasoning. Problem-based learning is I think is really, we know contraindications and so on, but really need such tools. More simulations is also important. But the big lectures, I think, is a history.
Great. I agree very much with you, and really good example from your universities, how to start this transition by starting from the bottom, changing curricula and teaching methods. And I think this is the way how it should be done. So we are overpassing the time. I see Gian Battista had put some thoughts in the chat. Maybe just to read the last one, teaching should be the transmission of an experience between tutor and tutee, and this can be done only only to the bedside. Knowledge transmission, brain can go online, attitude, heart, and skills, hands must go in presence. So I think with this we can finish our session today. I wish to thank all the speakers for really good insights and overviews on this topic. Thank you to all the participants, and see you on the next session, which is going to be on July 1st. So see you till then. Bye.
Good afternoon to Central Asia.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.